Now, RBI has issued a guideline and is going to sort of firm that up in coming weeks, if not months, wherein it is telling banks, both public sector as well as private sector banks, that any time you change the interest rate when it comes to a floating interest rate, you've got to communicate those floating rate changes very, very clearly to the end borrowers. Now, at the same time, it's also saying that sometimes, what happens with a floating interest rate is that the option of switching, converting to a fixed interest rate, banks make it very difficult for consumers to switch from a floating to a fixed interest rate. Third thing is that banks at times, when you opt for a floating interest rate, if the rate changes, given any external factor like the RBI changing its repo rate, like we've been in a pause for the last 3 months, but anytime the rate changes, there's a hike or a cut, that should impact the floating interest rate as well. Now, when that interest impacts the floating interest rate, either the size of the EMI changes, increases or reduces, or the tenure of the loan changes. These issues, the RBI has noticed, have not yet clearly been communicated to borrowers. So, RBI is now telling banks that you've got to be transparent on the EMI, on the tenure and on the charges, on the changes when it comes to floating interest rates. So, these are guidelines issued by RBI after the monetary policy yesterday, asking banks to be more transparent.
Right. RBI asking for transparency, even as banks are in need of more transparency when it comes to their books and lending and who they are lending to. But this one is very important. This one has got to do with you and I, not with the MSMEs, small companies in this country. Home loan EMIs and tenure guidelines for all those that tuned into this broadcast this morning, on the cusp of buying a home or already in the middle of paying EMIs. It's important that you watch out for all those updates. Meanwhile, let's also talk about a couple of other things that we are discussing, Kartik. We've discussed markets, we've discussed banks, we've discussed what the Prime Minister had to say about the markets this morning.